Life is far more than what the eyes can see and the hands can touch. Beneath the surface of our daily routines, behind the conversations and decisions we make, there is a deeper reality, a spiritual realm where battles are fought and victories are won long before they appear in the physical. Many go through life unaware of this truth, thinking their struggles are merely the result of circumstance, human behavior, or chance. But those who have awakened to the reality of the unseen know that the challenges we face are often the echoes of a much greater conflict. Evil does not always march in with loud threats or obvious force. More often it approaches quietly, working through thoughts, whispers of doubt, subtle temptations, and the slow erosion of conviction. It feeds on distraction, weakness, and fear, slipping into the cracks of an unguarded life. It's not the kind of enemy you can defeat with physical strength or clever words. It's an enemy that must be confronted in a different way, through strength of spirit. And while this reality can be sobering, it also carries hope, because there is a way to stand in such a position of spiritual strength that evil cannot touch you. Think of it this way. There are some people you meet who carry an unexplainable presence. You can't quite define it, but you sense that they are steady, unshaken, and untouchable by the usual storms that rattle others. They don't crumble under pressure. They don't react out of fear, and they don't get pulled into the traps that snare so many. Evil seems to avoid them, as if it recognizes something about them that warns, this one is not to be touched. That presence doesn't come from luck, from worldly power, or from a personality trait. It comes from something deeper, a hidden reality that has been cultivated over time, a connection to a source of strength that never runs dry. That is the spiritual secret we are going to uncover. The world is full of voices telling you how to protect yourself. Self-defense classes, security systems, and financial safeguards. All of these may have their place, but none of them address the deepest level of protection. Because when evil wants to break someone, it doesn't always come for their body first. It comes for their peace, their joy, their hope. It aims to drain the life from within until nothing remains but fear and resignation. This is why the most effective defense is not built from the outside in, but from the inside out. When the inner life is fortified, when your spirit is anchored in something unshakable, evil cannot get the foothold it needs to operate. There is a spiritual reality that many overlook. Darkness has no power to overtake light unless the light is dimmed or hidden. If your spirit burns bright, evil is forced to retreat, not because it chooses to, but because it cannot survive in the presence of that kind of power. This is not mystical superstition or wishful thinking. It is a truth that has been proven time and again in the lives of those who have stood their ground in the face of great opposition. They did not escape challenges, but they walked through them without losing themselves, and they emerged stronger on the other side. The good news is that this kind of strength is not reserved for a select few. It is not something you must be born with, nor is it given only to certain personalities or positions. It is available to anyone who understands where it comes from and is willing to align their life with it. The first step is recognizing that the battles you face are not merely against people, situations, or circumstances. They are part of a bigger picture, and to win them, you need a bigger power. This is where the spiritual secret begins, not with fear of evil, but with the unshakable certainty that you do not stand alone in the fight. When that reality takes root in your heart, you begin to walk differently. Your words carry weight. Your presence commands respect. And without even realizing it, you become the kind of person evil chooses to leave alone. Evil is a master of disguise. It rarely appears in the obvious form we expect, because open confrontation would make it easier to resist. Instead, it works in layers, through deception, through small compromises, through carefully placed distractions that lead the heart and mind away from truth. It thrives on confusion, because when people are unsure of what is real and what is false, they become vulnerable to influence. It thrives on fear, because fear causes people to shrink back, to stay silent when they should speak, to accept chains when they should stand free. And it thrives on spiritual weakness, because an unfortified soul is like a house with open doors. It welcomes whatever comes in. Evil doesn't care how it enters as long as it finds a way. Sometimes it comes wrapped in charm, promising comfort or quick solutions. Other times it comes as pressure, intimidation, or relentless attacks designed to wear you down over time. Regardless of the form it takes, its purpose remains the same: to pull you away from your true source of strength so that it can take control piece by piece. Understanding its nature is not about glorifying it or fearing it. It's about knowing the kind of enemy you face so you can recognize its tactics and refuse to give it ground. Evil's reach extends beyond physical harm. It can invade relationships, turning love into bitterness. It can corrupt dreams, replacing them with doubt. It can distort identity, making people forget who they truly are. It respects no boundary except one: spiritual authority. This is why some individuals, though they face the same world, are untouched by the destruction that consumes others. It is not because they live easier lives or because evil overlooks them. It is because they carry within them something that evil cannot penetrate. Evil is not repelled by resistance alone. It is repelled by the presence of something greater, something it cannot overpower. This is why no amount of human cleverness or willpower can match it. It must be confronted on the level where it operates, the spiritual level. If you try to fight spiritual battles with physical tools, you will find yourself exhausted and defeated. But when you meet spiritual opposition with spiritual strength, you hold the one advantage that cannot be taken from you. This is the reality that shifts the balance in your favor. Once you see evil for what it truly is, and once you understand the limits of its power against a fortified spirit, it loses the grip it once had. It does not vanish from the world, but it backs away from you. Not because it wants to, but because it has no choice. There are those whose very presence seems to carry an invisible shield. You can't quite explain it, but when they walk into a room, the atmosphere changes. They are not necessarily the loudest or the most commanding in appearance, yet something about them causes evil to keep its distance. They do not flinch when others are shaken, and they do not get entangled in the snares that so easily trap those around them. This steadiness is not born of arrogance, stubbornness, or blind optimism. It comes from a depth of spiritual grounding that anchors them no matter what storms rage around them. They operate from a place that is not dependent on circumstances, people's opinions, or shifting emotions. Their peace is unshaken, their convictions are clear, and their inner compass is steady. This is not a coincidence or a natural trait. It is the result of a deliberate, consistent alignment with truth and a power greater than themselves. Evil recognizes this alignment because it knows it cannot manipulate someone who is rooted in something unmovable. This kind of strength is not exclusive to certain personalities or life experiences. It is not about being naturally brave, exceptionally intelligent, or socially dominant. It is about what governs the inner life. A person who draws their strength from the unchanging foundation of truth becomes immune to the tactics of deception. They are not swayed by flattery, nor are they crushed by threats. Their worth is not determined by what others say or do. So manipulation loses its grip. When evil tests them, it finds no open doors, no fear to exploit, no bitterness to inflame, no doubt to magnify. What it finds instead is a spirit already surrendered to a higher authority, and that authority is one that evil cannot touch. This is why some people seem untouchable. It is not that they never face difficulty or temptation. It is that they have fortified themselves in a way that makes evil's efforts useless. Anyone can cultivate this kind of presence, but it requires intention, discipline, and a willingness to live by principles that do not shift when life gets hard. Once that is in place, you do not need to chase away evil. It will back away on its own. The secret that causes evil to back away is not wrapped in mystery for the sake of being hidden. It is simple, but it demands commitment. It is a life anchored in unshakable faith, guarded by integrity and empowered by truth. This kind of faith is not just belief in words or ideas. It is trust that has been tested and proven in the fires of life. It does not bend when challenged, and it does not fade when circumstances turn dark. Evil cannot dwell where truth dominates, because truth exposes lies, and lies are the oxygen evil breathes. When your spirit is aligned with that truth, you carry an atmosphere that evil cannot comfortably inhabit. This is not about outward displays of religion, nor is it about trying to appear strong in front of others. It is about an inward transformation so deep that it changes the way you think, speak, and act without you forcing it. When the core of your life is governed by what is pure, just, and unshakable, evil's influence simply cannot take hold. The power of this secret is not in the performance of rituals or the repetition of certain words, but in the reality of who you are becoming on the inside. It is in the quiet choices you make when no one is watching, in the integrity you hold to even when compromise would be easier, and in the consistency of walking in alignment with what is right. This alignment creates a spiritual covering, a shield that does not depend on your mood or on the circumstances around you. People who live in this reality do not need to constantly fight back against every attack, because their very presence resists it. They are like a bright light in a dark room. Darkness has no choice but to retreat when they enter. This is the essence of the spiritual secret. It is not about chasing away evil with fear or force, but about living in such a way that it cannot stay near you. Once you grasp this truth, you begin to understand that spiritual strength is not built for the moments of crisis alone. It is a way of life that ensures victory long before the battle ever begins. Evil has boundaries, though it will never admit it. It can only operate where it is given permission, whether that permission is intentional or through neglect. This is why spiritual authority is so vital. When someone lives under divine authority, they carry a strength that does not originate from themselves, but flows through them from a greater source. This authority is not loud, boastful, or forceful. It is steady, confident, and absolute. Evil recognizes it immediately because it knows it cannot overpower it. There is no negotiation, no drawn-out struggle. The authority simply stands, and darkness yields. The most effective resistance is not found in frantic attempts to fight back with sheer willpower, but in remaining so aligned with that higher authority that your very stance communicates, you have no place here. This is not about arrogance or self-reliance. It is about knowing where your strength comes from and refusing to step outside that covering. The mistake many make is trying to face evil on its own terms, as though it were a purely human conflict that could be resolved with clever words, physical defense, or emotional resilience. But when the battle is spiritual, those tools are limited at best and useless at worst. True power over darkness does not come from shouting at it or obsessing over it. It comes from walking in such close harmony with truth and righteousness that darkness cannot find any agreement in you. Evil thrives where there is compromise. Remove the compromise, and its grip is broken. That is why authority over darkness is not about chasing after every manifestation of it, but about living in a way that leaves it no ground to claim. You don't have to match its force with your own. You simply have to remain in alignment with the source of all authority, and it will retreat on its own. This is the unspoken power of those who seem untouchable. They do not waste energy in unnecessary battles, because the authority they walk in settles the matter before the fight even begins. The mind is the first and fiercest battlefield. Before evil can influence actions, it must first influence thoughts. Every destructive decision, every compromise in character, every surrender of courage begins with an idea planted in the mind. This is why guarding the mind is not optional, it is essential. The thoughts you allow to take root shape the direction of your life, and evil knows this well. It works tirelessly to sow seeds of doubt, fear, insecurity, and pride, because once those seeds grow, they begin to weaken your resolve from within. Guarding the mind means being intentional about what you allow to enter it. It means filtering out the lies before they settle, replacing them with truth, so there is no room for deception to thrive. A disciplined mind does not accept every thought that appears. It examines each one, keeping what strengthens and discarding what destroys. This is how the mind becomes a shield instead of a doorway for attack. Many underestimate how quickly unguarded thoughts can erode strength. A single unchecked fear can multiply into a paralyzing mindset. One tolerated resentment can grow into full bitterness that poisons everything. One compromise in truth can open the door for more compromises until the line between right and wrong becomes blurred. Guarding the mind requires daily vigilance. It is not about avoiding challenges or pretending that harmful influences do not exist. It is about facing them with the clarity to reject what is false and embrace what is true. When your mind is fortified with truth, evil's whispers lose their power. Lies cannot grow where they find no agreement. Fear cannot dominate where faith is deeply rooted. Temptation cannot take hold where the will is already committed to righteousness. This kind of mental discipline is one of the greatest spiritual defenses a person can build. Because once the mind is under control, the rest of life begins to follow in strength and stability. Evil may attempt to attack from other angles, but without access to your thoughts, its reach is severely limited. The heart is the wellspring of life, the center from which emotions, motivations, and intentions flow. While the mind shapes how we think, the heart shapes why we act, and evil knows this is a critical point of influence. If it cannot take your mind, it will aim for your heart, seeking to twist your deepest feelings into weapons against you. Bitterness is one of its most effective tools. Once lodged in the heart, it can cloud judgment, poison relationships, and harden you against truth. Anger, too, when left uncontrolled, can burn through the heart like a fire, consuming peace and replacing it with destruction. Unforgiveness creates chains that bind you to the very wounds you long to be free from. That is why guarding the heart is just as essential as guarding the mind. When the heart is kept pure, free from the corrosion of resentment, malice, and selfishness, evil loses one of its most reliable footholds. Guarding the heart does not mean closing it off or becoming cold and distant. On the contrary, a guarded heart is still open to love, compassion, and mercy. It simply refuses to be a host for emotions that destroy. It means choosing forgiveness even when the wound feels fresh, not because the offense was acceptable, but because unforgiveness is a poison that harms the one who holds it. It means letting go of anger before it takes control, refusing to let rage dictate decisions. It means allowing joy, gratitude, and humility to take root, because these create an environment where evil cannot survive. A clean heart is not naive, it is discerning. It knows that not every feeling deserves to be nurtured, and that some emotions must be released for the sake of spiritual survival. When your heart is guarded in this way, evil may still attempt to provoke you, but it will find no reaction strong enough to open the door. Your spirit remains steady, your purpose remains clear, and your inner life stays in harmony with what is good. In such a state, the heart becomes a fortress, not of stone, but of light, impossible for darkness to conquer. Peace is one of the most underestimated forms of strength in the spiritual life. Many think of peace as passive, as if it means doing nothing in the face of adversity. But true peace is anything but weakness. It is a firm, unshakable calm that stands unmoved while chaos swirls all around. Evil thrives in disorder and confusion, because where there is no stability, there is vulnerability. When people are unsettled, they are more easily manipulated, more prone to rash decisions, and more willing to compromise just to find relief. But a person who carries genuine peace cannot be rushed, baited, or provoked into stepping outside their place of safety. Peace disarms evil because it removes the urgency and fear on which evil feeds. It says, without words, I am not moved by your threats, your noise, or your schemes, and that steadiness frustrates and weakens every attack. This kind of peace does not come from pretending problems do not exist or ignoring the reality of danger. It comes from deep trust. Trust that there is a greater power governing your life, a higher order that no amount of darkness can overturn. Peace is not the absence of storms, it is the ability to remain steady in the middle of them. When your spirit is anchored in that trust, Peace becomes your natural state, and evil loses its ability to provoke fear or panic in you. Even when circumstances demand anxiety, your calm presence stands as a declaration that you are not under the control of the storm. And this is something evil cannot tolerate, because it cannot work effectively in the presence of such stability. Peace forces it to retreat, because its usual strategies, confusion, intimidation, and pressure, fail to gain any ground. The world may expect you to be shaken, but when you remain unmoved, you quietly display one of the greatest spiritual strengths there is. This is why cultivating peace is not optional. It is a weapon in its own right, one that can turn the tide of any spiritual confrontation without you lifting a single physical hand. Strength that repels evil is not built in a single moment of courage. It is the result of daily, consistent choices. Many believe they can stand firm in the day of testing without preparing in the days before, but spiritual resilience does not work that way. Just as physical strength comes from repeated exercise, spiritual strength grows through steady, disciplined practice. Every day, in small, unseen decisions, you are either strengthening your defenses or weakening them. The discipline of consistency means aligning your thoughts, words, and actions with truth again and again, even when no one is watching, even when it feels inconvenient, and even when compromise would be easier. This steady commitment builds a foundation that cannot be shaken when the pressure comes. Evil watches for patterns of weakness, moments when your guard drops and your convictions waver. But when you remain consistent, you offer no such opening. Consistency also develops an atmosphere around you that evil cannot easily penetrate. Over time, your inner strength becomes part of who you are, not just something you try to summon in emergencies. This is why those who practice daily alignment with truth often appear unshakable. They have trained their spirit to respond in strength automatically. They do not have to scramble for courage when they are under attack, because they have been building it day by day. This makes them far less of a target, because evil is drawn to those it believes it can manipulate or break down over time. When it sees that you do not give in easily, and that your convictions remain the same in both ease and hardship, it recognizes the effort it would take to defeat you, and often it chooses to look elsewhere. The discipline of consistency is not glamorous, and it rarely earns applause, but it is one of the most powerful tools you can possess. It transforms your strength from something temporary into something unshakable, and when that happens, evil loses one of its greatest advantages, the ability to wear you down slowly. Evil is attracted to fear the way a predator is drawn to weakness. It can sense hesitation, insecurity, and timidity, and it uses these as entry points to advance its influence. But courage changes the entire dynamic. Courage sends a clear, undeniable signal that you will not be controlled, manipulated, or intimidated. It does not mean you feel no fear at all. True courage often exists in the presence of fear. What makes it powerful is the choice to act, speak, and stand despite that fear. When you refuse to be paralyzed, you break the grip that fear tries to tighten around your life. Courage is like a wall that evil runs into. It expects you to retreat, but instead it meets resistance. And this resistance forces it to reconsider, because evil rarely invests effort where there is little chance of victory. The strength of courage is that it changes the balance of power without requiring aggression. You do not have to be loud or confrontational to be courageous. You simply need to be unwavering in your stance. Courage can be quiet, yet unyielding. It is seen when you hold to truth, even when others push for compromise, when you refuse to betray your values for temporary safety, when you stand for what is right, even if you stand alone. This kind of courage is not built in a single heroic moment. It grows from every time you choose integrity over convenience, faith over doubt, and strength over surrender. Over time, courage becomes part of your very presence, something evil can sense from the outset. And when it does, it often moves on, because it knows that intimidation and pressure will not bend you. In this way, courage becomes not just a defense, but a deterrent, turning away attacks before they even begin. Light is the one thing darkness cannot withstand. No matter how deep or oppressive the shadows may seem, the moment light appears, darkness is forced to retreat. This is not a matter of negotiation or struggle. It is simply the nature. When a person's life burns brightly with truth, integrity, and love, they carry that same undeniable effect in the spiritual realm. Evil can disguise itself in many ways, but it cannot hide from the light. A life illuminated from within exposes deception, uncovers hidden motives, and reveals the reality of what is good and what is destructive. This exposure is what evil fears most, because once it is seen for what it truly is, it loses much of its power. The light you carry is not about drawing attention to yourself, but about reflecting the truth that fuels it. That reflection becomes a shield in itself, because evil knows it cannot operate freely in the presence of that kind of clarity. The beauty of light is that it does not need to fight darkness directly. It simply shines. You do not need to constantly be on the defensive, chasing down every shadow or proving your strength to those who doubt it. Your role is to keep your light burning brightly, and the rest happens naturally. This light is fueled by the choices you make, the truth you stand on, and the love you refuse to let go of even in difficult circumstances. Over time, it becomes part of who you are, so much so that you may not even realize how strongly it affects the world around you. People notice it, even if they cannot explain it, and evil certainly notices it, because it recognizes that in the presence of such light, its lies are powerless and its influence is weakened. This is why one of the greatest protections you can carry is simply to live in a way that reflects truth so clearly that there is no room for darkness to remain. Evil will always exist in the world, but it does not have to dominate your life. The difference between those who live under its influence and those who walk in freedom is not chance. It is choice. The spiritual secret is not about avoiding challenges or pretending darkness is not real. It is about living in a way that leaves no space for it to gain control. When your mind is guarded, your heart is clean, your spirit is anchored, and your life is aligned with truth, you become untouchable in ways the world cannot fully explain. Evil may still attempt to approach, but it will find no foothold, no fear to exploit, no weakness to manipulate, no compromise to leverage. This is not because of personal strength alone, but because of what covers you, what fills you, and what guides you. You are not standing on your own. You are standing in the shadow of something far greater, and that reality forces darkness to step back. Living in this reality is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. Every choice you make either strengthens your shield or weakens it. Every thought you entertain, every emotion you nurture, every action you take is part of building the life that either invites evil in or causes it to back away. The more you choose truth over deception, courage over fear, peace over chaos, and integrity over compromise, the more you cultivate an atmosphere that evil cannot inhabit. This is how spiritual authority becomes visible. It is not announced with words, but demonstrated through the consistency of a life fully surrendered to what is right. And once that life is established, you do not have to constantly chase away darkness. It will keep its distance on its own. You become a living testament to the power of that spiritual secret, a reminder that evil is not all-powerful and that it cannot stand where truth reigns. And as you continue in that path, you discover that the greatest victory over evil is not just resisting it, but living so powerfully in the light that it has no choice but to retreat before you.